Hello everyone, my name is Angus McLennan. I'm your instructor for social change online / distance learning, Block 2, Fall, Wilmington University. That was a mouthful. I'm going to take this opportunity, along with my kitten here, Stormy, to introduce myself, tell you a little bit about who I am, what I do, where I come from. And of course this goes along with one of your first tasks with the discussion board. So let's begin at the beginning. Before I was born, both my parents were in the British military, both majors, meeting in India. My mother was my mother had a regiment of Wakai, Women's Auxiliary Corps, and my father was a royal, he was an artillery officer. They're called Royal Signals. Anyway, prior to partition, there were only 3 ways to get out of India: in a pine box, get married and you'd be shipped home, or buy out your commission. A foreign concept to Americans, but anyway. My parents married, they were shipped home, and I was born in a small army camp town called Catterick in Yorkshire. The marriage, however, did not last. My father went off to Suez, and my mother, along with her great-grandmother, bought a small guest house in Edinburgh, Scotland, which is where I was brought up until the age of 12 and a half. The guest house primarily catered to tourists during the Edinburgh Festival in the fall, and year-round we had university students from all over the world, although primarily from Africa and the Caribbean and India. So I was surrounded by intellectuals, so to speak, as a child. I was bounced on more black knees than white, and would look at these men in the house as prospective suitors for my mother. Just thought I'd throw that out. Being brought up in a single-parent household was highly unusual at the time. My mother was involved in the Pan-African movement, and I got to meet, although I certainly do not know them and they do not remember me, many of the subsequent leaders in Africa. Anyway, an American sugar daddy came along in 1961, 1962, and I was whisked off to the United States with my mother in 1964. This is a long story. Anyway, I'm just going to give you an idea of social change here. I suffered massive culture shock coming from a country such as Great Britain, socialist in nature, community in thinking, and coming to America where everyone was an individual and everyone flaunted what they had. My education initially was at a University of California at Berkeley, Oakland Secondary Demonstration High School. I got 2 A's and a B for summer school. They didn't quite know what to do with me at 12 and a half, so they put me in the 9th grade. My stepfather at the time did not have a job. He ended up working for the CIA, which he had been involved in. We came back to Washington, D.C. in the fall of 1964, and I attended a desegregated, although I certainly did not know it at the time, junior high school, where I met and fell in like with a young Negro woman, young Negro girl, Candy Striper, who was several years my senior. I have no idea what she saw in me, and was quite unaware that several miles away across the Potomac in Alexandria that there was a segregated school system and that people had to ride in the back of a bus in the South. I had come from a country that was, as I learned later, racist. If you were a member of the British Empire, it didn't matter what color you were or what you looked like. You were a Brit. If you weren't, you were something else. I won't say what else, but anyway. There is a difference between racism and prejudice. I had to learn prejudice, and that is an important part of my life because I did learn prejudice. We left Washington, and I spent my teenage years on Okinawa and in Japan, where, as earlier I said, most of my peers were much older than myself, and people of color were few and far between. I came back to the United States in 1967 and went to a high school Wakefield High School in Arlington. And I got to watch Washington burn in 1968. I believe it would have been in April, as a reaction to the death of Dr. Martin Luther King. That's enough about that. Anyway, I went to American University. Black Panthers were there in 1969, 1970, sitting in the back of the classroom, saying, we want your money so that we can go out and buy guns to overthrow the government. I myself became involved in the anti-war movement and suffered cognitive dissonance in my early years with the university, because during the day, at a summer internship, I was working at the CIA, and then going to school at night, and the tear gas shells were flying over the K Spiritual Center on campus. American U was the Berkeley of the East Coast. So I have a slight liberal bent, although as one grows up, you become more middle class. But it's hard to get rid of. You know, I believe in America, I love America, I just wish she'd learned from her mistakes. So my education is in political science. I have a master's in government and a bachelor's in government and a master's in political theory. I then went into business. I tried the State Department. I didn't pass the exam, so I went into business. God help me. Long story short, ended up in Delaware many, many years later, and started working for the Department of Corrections. I have over 800 hours in counseling, continuing education credits. I'm a certified master addictions counselor and a certified forensic counselor. My day job is with the Department of Corrections as a supervisor. I run the classification and transfer / movement office at the Georgetown, Sussex Correctional Institution. My avocation, however, is teaching. I've been with Wilmington University for 14, now going on 15 years. I've certainly taught social change for the last 13 years, both face-to-face and most recently online. This will be my third online course. It's my third online course. So don't be afraid. I know what I'm doing. I encourage you to spend as much time as you can on the course, and I hope you enjoy it. The first thing people have trouble with is that a distance learning course is not self-paced. You have to follow the guidelines. You cannot leave everything until the end of the week. I'm sorry, Stormy. This is Stormy, by the way. She was brought to work by a colleague in a wheel well of her car the day before Hurricane Irene. So we were originally going to name her Irene, but we ended up naming her Stormy. And she's about 10 weeks old, and she is just awesome. It's been a long time since my wife and I have had a kitten. Anyway, back to the class and being human. Distance learning can be both very rewarding. It can also be very difficult. The biggest problem for most students is time management. You must allocate time for the class every day. If nothing else, check your email, check in with the discussion board, do a reading. You must spend at least 2 hours, 3 to 4 days a week on this class. If you're not prepared to do that, you will not do well. If you do that, if you spend up to 10 hours a week on this class, you will do exceedingly well. I like interaction with my students, and in fact, in some instances, I feel I get to know my students better online than I do face-to-face. In a face-to-face class, there's always a student or two who sits in the back and does not interact. In an online course, I can get to know you, not only through the discussion board, but through emails. Anyway, that's enough about me. Your first assignment is to tell me and your fellow students about you. I wish you luck, and I will be seeing you online.